Great. All right, I like to start off enthusiastic. That's good. My name's Allison McFarlane. I'm the director of the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs here at the University of British Columbia, and it's a pleasure to welcome you tonight as we open a new season of the Lind Initiative. Before we go any further, I want to acknowledge that we're gathered here tonight on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. This land has long been a place of learning, dialogue, and stewardship, and we're grateful for the opportunity to gather here tonight. For those of you who've joined us before, welcome back. And for those who are here for the first time, welcome. The Lind Initiative is a series hosted at UBC that brings together diverse public thinkers to engage with the most pressing political and social questions of our time. One of the defining features of the Lind Initiative is its role as a public forum for serious, open inquiry. It's a space where complex ideas can be explored, tested, and debated in public. Just as importantly, in a political moment where civil discourse often feels forgotten, and where many of us encounter politics through increasingly narrow and curated information streams, controlled by algorithms, we aim to model a different kind of engagement. One in which ideas are challenged without personal attack, where debate remains respectful, and where curiosity is treated as a strength rather than a weakness. Yeah. That commitment feels especially important right now. In that spirit, I hope over the course of this series, you hear something that you disagree with. Not because disagreement is an end in itself, but because encountering ideas that challenge our assumptions and sitting with them thoughtfully is an essential part of intellectual and civic life. We hope you come to these events with an open mind, a critical ear, and a shared commitment to engaging one another and our speakers with respect. We are just over a year into the second Trump presidency, and can you believe it's been just a year? Already, many of the assumptions that once anchored our understanding of global politics feel unstable. To paraphrase our Prime Minister's excellent recent speech at Davos, we're witnessing a rupture with the post-war global order. That sense of dislocation and disorientation is the starting point for this year's Lind Initiative series. This year, we ask what happens when the world's most powerful country moves away from the rules and institutions it once helped to build, as America First-driven unilateralism reshapes American foreign policy. We are seeing a growing strain on multilateral institutions, the weakening of alliances, and the rise of rival powers offering alternative visions of global order. Together, these shifts raise difficult questions about security, democracy, truth, and power, questions that extend far beyond the United States and carry real consequences for all of us here in Canada. Before we turn to tonight's program, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the Lind family. The late Phil Lind, the namesake of this initiative, imagined it as a place where open conversation could thrive. Thanks to the family's continued generosity, that vision endures, giving us an opportunity to promote thoughtful discussion and critical thinking. Please join me in expressing our deep gratitude to the Lind family for their ongoing support. Finally, a few logistical notes before we get to tonight's programming. We'll be taking audience questions later in the event using Slido. So you can submit and upvote questions by visiting slido.com and entering the code displayed up there on the screen. As always, a gentle reminder to silence your cell phones. It's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this evening, Peter Klein. Peter is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and professor here at UBC School of Journalism, Writing, and Media. Before joining UBC, he spent many years producing investigative journalism at 60 Minutes and has worked across some of the most respected news programs in the United States. His work has been recognized by the Emmy Awards, the Murrow Awards, and many others, and we're very grateful to have him guiding tonight's conversation. And finally, our featured guest of the evening, Thomas Friedman. His career spans decades and includes far too many accolades to list here, so I'll be brief. As a longtime columnist for the New York Times, and the author of numerous best-selling books, including The World is Flat and Thank You for Being Late, Thomas Friedman has been one of the most influential voices shaping the public debate about globalization, geopolitics, and America's role in the world. As his work has consistently pushed audiences to engage with the structural forces reshaping global politics, we can imagine no one better to help us open this year's series. Please join me in welcoming Thomas Friedman.
Thank you, Tom. That was pretty amazing. I'm going to start with a tough question. We know that, well, we have mixed reviews about what your wife's thoughts were on The World is Flat. I thought it was a great title. What did she think about you using the term Polyscene?
Okay. Thought we were in your living room there for a second. Yeah, my wife was cool with that, actually. You know, it's a very good question, Peter, because I was a little worried about it. I thought, you know, in this world we live in, people could easily mock this and whatnot. It was amazing the feedback I got on it. Because people know, you know, I really believe in the value of naming things because it's valuable for people because it gives a framework and gives a sense of priorities. And I'm not going to tell you like it's caught on like wildfire everywhere, but I've just been struck at how many people read it and came back and commented on it. So whether it'll ever take, I don't know. You know, it was Walter Lippmann who named the Cold War, and so I thought I'd take a stab at it.
Good. Well, we certainly need a term for it. So we're going to talk about the Polyscene, this era that we're in. We're in Canada, and Prime Minister of Canada gave a pretty historic speech the other day. Really, I would argue probably the first world leader who very publicly, there's lots of people who've tweeted, and Macron wrote a note saying, hey, you know, chill out with the Greenland. But this was like out at, you know, the World Economic Forum. First of all, what do you think of that? And why has it taken so long for that to happen?
Well, I thought it was a remarkable speech. It hung together, and I thought it was courageous for him to say that because Trump's a vindictive person, and he can take it out on him and on Canada and on Canadians. So
while we were here, I think Trump tweeted or socialed that Mark Carney is no longer invited to his peace tea.
Oh, really? Oh, my gosh. Oh. Anything but that.
All the news is fit to print. I had to, you know, convey.
You know, Trump's actually, besides what Mark did, I have the pleasure of knowing him, he's not had a good week. First, the stock market completely smacked down what he wanted to do. Then the leader of Canada did the same. The leader of France did the same. Even some senators did the same. and even a few in his own party. But what was most interesting to me as I was sitting in the green room was seeing J.D. Vance go to Minneapolis and say, we all need to just calm down. Pay attention to that. I'll tell you exactly where that came from. The White House pollster came into Trump and said, people do not like this. And suddenly J.D. Vance was the guy who basically justified the murder of Rene Good by the killing of Rene Good by an ICE officer, was there trying to calm people down, you know. I really had the pleasure of I did a seminar with a group of your students before I came out. We had an amazing conversation. And I told them a story, and this did not surprise me at all, because I actually had a column in my head. If you watched how Trump had spoken about Rene Good, the woman who was shot, the first time and Twitter said she deserved it, basically, she ran over a cop. Then a few days later, he was asked about it at visiting a plant in Detroit, and he said, you know, I'm sure she was a really nice woman. You can see the polling, just like, because they're so transparent. So I was telling your students, you know, this doesn't surprise me because last year, a year ago, my lecture agent called me to do a lecture at Pittsburgh State University. And a year went by, really. It was booked a year in advance. And it turned out the week before I had to go there, I had to go to Korea, and I came home literally the night before, but I said to myself, no problem, it's Pittsburgh, I live in Washington. And I got my logistics from my lecture agent. He said, no, it's Pittsburgh without an H. I said, where is Pittsburgh without an H? He said, it's in southern Kansas. I said, you have to be kidding, okay? How do I get to Pittsburgh without an H? He said, you fly to Chicago, then you fly to Springfield, Missouri, then you take a 2-hour car ride. So, of course, I did this, went down to Pittsburgh without an H. It's in Crawford County, Kansas, that Trump won 66-31 last election %. Gave my talk, really lovely people, lovely audience, great students, had a really nice time. And after we did an event just like this, and a university professor, a political scientist, questioned me, and I don't remember, Peter, what he asked me, I just remember my answer. And my answer was, Trump says his favorite word is tariffs. My favorite word is public. Public schools, public parks, public service, public health, public transport, public places. And I got the loudest ovation I ever got in Pittsburgh without an H. And I am telling you, the American people, a majority of the American people do not like this, being pitted against one another, which is all that Trump knows. What that moment in Pittsburgh without an H reminded me is the muscle memory of Americans that want to be pulled together for common purpose, okay, and common sense solutions. And I think the candidate who figures that out in the next election and can convey that is the one that will win. And so I think we're at peak Trump right now, but I'm still confident that the America you know and knew is there. We're off on a terrible jag, but I still have hope and confidence we'll come back.
Well, last year, almost to the day, on this stage, in that chair, we had Adam Kinzinger, the former Republican member of Congress, who's been one of the most outspoken critics of Trump from the Republican side. Well, I would say from anywhere, really.
Yeah.
I spoke with him earlier today, and I told him I'm speaking with you, and I asked him, I said, some of you may have been here for Adam's talk. He painted a pretty grim picture of what he imagined this first year of the second administration of Trump was going to be like. And I asked him, so how is it? Is America great yet? Like, what do you think? How's it gone? And he said, it's gone so much worse than he imagined. But he really, that was a half a sentence, but he says, but it's going to end in 9 months. I am confident that the American public is going to switch things at the midterms. So I'm curious if you're confident about that. What you're suggesting here is that the American public is fundamentally good and is sick of this, even though they reelected Trump. Sorry, what's going to happen in 9 months?
I am hopeful, but I'm not confident, because the left has to get its act together too. And so Donald Trump got elected because Joe Biden left the border open, okay? And communities changed really rapidly, faster than people could absorb the change. And so, my view is that, I'm not good with sanctuary cities, just speaking personally, I believe that if I were in charge of Minnesota now, I would be saying ICE should only be going after criminals, not after people who have illegally crossed the border, okay, and are part of our communities now, and working and paying taxes and contributing to the life of our communities. That is what I would be saying. But I'd also be saying we have to pass a law to make that so. You can't just assert it. Because you know who else told the government what my friend, the mayor of Minneapolis, said to ICE? Get the fuck out of here. Bull Connor. Okay? The racists in the South in the 60s said the exact same thing to the federal government. Get the fuck out of here, because we think we should have separate schools and separate bathrooms. And you know what we did? We passed a law against it. We passed the Civil Rights Act. So I am, on immigration, look, I'm a both-and person. I am for a really high wall and a really big gate, okay? Because I'm super pro-immigration. But you will never have rationalized immigration if people don't feel the border is secure. And so I think the left has to come to terms with that. And that's what I'm begging people. Protect these people. Be for that. But say, as soon as we get into power, we're going to pass a law to rationalize this, which is exactly what Trump didn't want to do, because he wanted it as an issue. So my motto to my friends in Minneapolis is cell phones, not snowballs. Take pictures of this violent ICE behavior. It really bothers Americans. But don't engage in any violence, and have a plan so people don't just think you're for open borders.
Well, so Minneapolis is your hometown. I'm sure that what's happened there, I think, has resonated for a lot of people in this country and south of the border, but probably even more so for you, since it's your hometown. We've heard language, Tim Walz, governor, called ICE Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo. My parents were Holocaust survivors, so I take issue with sort of weaponizing language like that, but I understand the idea. And in fact, I mean, if you've seen the jackets that they wear, those sort of, these big kind of Gestapo-like jackets, I mean, they're kind of, they're feeding into this notion. Even if Adam Kinzinger is right, that there will be a sea change at the midterm elections, has the damage been done? I mean, I think you knew Tom Ridge,
yes.
who founded Homeland Security. I knew him quite well. Tom Ridge was, I mean, he's still around, but he's not well, but wonderful man, was a good person, set up this new department with good intentions of coordinating efforts. What we see now, you see the videos, you see the websites, it's not Tom Ridge's Homeland Security. Has the damage been done? Has the sort of rot set in to the point where it can't be undone regardless of what happens in the midterms?
I don't know. It's a legitimate question to ask, Peter. In my book, I didn't talk about sort of the penultimate chapter, which is I think we're in our third civil war over home. So home's a very important, concept for me, because I really grew up in a wonderful community. And so I really feel very attached to that notion. And I think many people do as well. Our first civil war over home was between Americans who thought they couldn't feel at home unless they could enslave a black person, and those who said, I can't feel at home if you do. Our second civil war over home was in the 60s, when people said, I can't feel at home unless we have separate but equal schools and bathrooms, and those who said, I can't feel at home if you do. And we resolved that with the Civil Rights Act. We're in our third civil war over home now. Only it's not just about race. It's about race, pace, and place. It's a multi-front war. So it's about race in that we're going from a white majority country to a minority majority country, and that has a lot of people feeling, I'm not going to be at home. Second, it's about pace. You know, in just like the last 15 years, I mean, people went to the grocery store and the woman at the cash register wasn't wearing a baseball hat. They went into the men's room and there was a woman there. They went to the office and their boss rolled up a robot and was studying their job. People's sense of home, people's sense of cultural norms, and people's sense of work all got destabilized at the same time. And along came Donald Trump and said, I can stop the wind, I will build a wall. The wall was a metaphor, not just for immigration. Lastly, we're having a civil war over place. There are a lot of Americans who cannot afford a home anymore. We have police and teachers in many communities that can't afford to buy a home in the community whose kids they educate and whose families they keep safe. And all of this is being roiled. So we would be roiling as America. We'd be a kind of a boiling pot, even if Trump wasn't there. But what happened, we have this boiling pot, and then come along Mark Zuckerberg, and he turned the heat up on the pot. He created social networks whose business model was to enrage you. Then Trump came along and took the lid off the pot and made it permissible and possible to say and do two things to and about each other that we never did before. So we have a lot of work to do to basically, get ourselves back where we can address this third civil war. Am I optimistic, like Adam Kinzinger? I'll tell you, if I am optimistic, it's for this reason. My dad's brother-in-law and sister came back from the war in 1948. My uncle fought in D-Day to Minneapolis, and they decided to set out to the frontier and to move to a town called Wilmer, Minnesota, which is halfway between Minneapolis and the Dakota border. It was sort of the capital of west central Minnesota. And at the time, the town was 99.999 Protestant, Catholic, Scandinavian, and German, and 3 Jewish families, one of whom was my aunt and uncle. They were the exotica in town, okay? And my aunt and uncle used to go to schools for the holidays and explain things. So I went to Wilmer for 50 years and watched this town evolve. Around 1975, my aunt came down to Minneapolis for a family event. She pulled me aside and said, Tom, I was in the grocery store on Saturday, and I heard someone speaking Spanish. It was her first encounter with the other, and she never forgot it, and I never forgot it. So fast forward to 5 years ago, I decide I'm going to go check out Wilmer, Minnesota, and I arrange a whole day visit. I started at Wilmer High School. The principal meets me in the lobby and shows me a steel map over the lobby that was donated by the people who bought my aunt and uncle's little steel distribution company, and he explained that the rising seniors every year stick pins in the map of every country they're from, because Wilmer, Minnesota today is 50% Somali and Latino. A town that in 1948, was 99% the other way. So I'm standing in the lobby with the principal, and the bell rings, and it's morning breakfast break. And kids line up for coffee and rolls. And I'm just looking at the student body, and it's a Benetton ad, So I say to the principal, do you have to have diversity class here? And he says, we tried that. They told us to get lost. Because Juan is now dating Zhao's sister, okay? Mohammed is, Lisa's best friend. They're just fine. This is normal for them. And my hope is that we're in the transition, and when this generation comes of age, when my grandchildren go to Wilmer, and it's this incredibly diverse town, that we will be through to the other side of this. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take real leadership. But I am convinced Trump is at the end of something, not the beginning of something. Thank you.
So there are a number of questions here about where the leadership is on the left, where the big tent economic populism is, what's going on with the Democratic Party. But before I ask you a question about that, I'd love you, if you don't mind, I've seen you write about that Bedouin story about the stolen turkey. Could you quickly, very briefly tell that story, and how does that relate to what is going on right now?
Leadership, yeah.
In leadership.
So this is a story that was told to me by Clinton Bailey, who was the Israeli expert on Bedouin poetry, actually. And it was the story of a Bedouin chief who one day called his sons together and said, "Sons, something terrible has happened. Our turkey has been stolen." And their sons say, "Dad, what's the big deal? It's a turkey. You get another one." He said, "No, get me back my turkey." Next week he calls his sons together and tells them, "My horse was stolen. Get me back my turkey." Next week he calls his sons together, "Your sister was stolen. Get me back my turkey." The whole point, he said, is once they saw they could steal our turkey, they took everything. And that's the story of Trump. Once he realized he could get away with not sharing his tax returns, that every American president has done before, he knew he could get away with everything. And we just let him keep stealing our turkey. And one of the things the thing that shocked me most about this, I'd say people stop me on the street and say, "Thank you for your courage." I say, "I'm just writing my column." It's really, honestly, it doesn't take much courage to go down, and write my column. But in the context of what's going on now, it just stuns me that you have an entire Republican Party, virtually entire Republican Party, that is ready to swallow their pride and dignity for a job that pays $180,000 and free parking at National Airport. Like, who knew it would be so cheap,
And these are people who, pretty much every one of them, call him a charlatan, modern-day Hitler. It's not like they were...
No.
We know what they really believe.
And Liz Cheney's a friend of mine, and I once asked Liz, I said, "Liz, how could there only be one of you? Or Adam Kinzinger, too?" And it's just, what I don't understand, I think of it at a very human level. I actually don't know anyone in my life who behaves that way. And if I behaved that way, my golf clubs and mattress would be in the driveway, having been thrown out the window by my wife, okay? And my daughters wouldn't be talking to me. So I really kind of wonder what happens when they go home. And doesn't their wife or their daughter say, "Hey, Dad, that's really icky, You didn't say anything for that?" I just don't get it. And that's what's been the most depressing thing about what's going on now. People who and you alluded to your relative. This is how it happened in Germany, that people just didn't stand up. Right. But I don't think we're Germany, and I do think this will change. I hope it will change. But there is fear. There is real fear in America now. And part of that's social networks, and people can create a flash mob, and so I hope it's a passing phase, but I can't say for sure.
Part of the problem also, as noted by a wise questioner here, is that there's a broken governance system.
Yeah.
You have gerrymandering, you have the political action committees, you have this essentially unfettered political donation, which you don't have up here.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, our elections, there's an election, and 4 minutes later, you know,
Right.
there's something happen, and I mean, it's very civilized the way
Yeah.
most parts of the world are done. Without, I mean, you know, we have our problems up here, but without the level of endless money and influence,
Yeah.
and could that ever change? Because until that changes, it's hard to imagine real political change.
I agree with you. We are, what I do in my last chapter of the book is I try to imagine how do we restore the center. And we basically need to do three things. We need to bring the edges in, we need to bring the bottom economically up, and we need to bring the temperature down. You know, so what we need, obviously, is our politicians aren't stupid, they're just following where the cheese is. So because we created separate party primaries, we put the cheese on the edge. A Republican can only lose to someone to his farther right or a Democrat to farther left, so we end up in these very low attendance but high activist primaries with the most extreme candidates. So we're actually structurally polarizing ourselves. What do we need? Open primaries. One single open primary where Republicans and Democrats have to run together and appeal to each other's base. Where have we seen open primaries and ranked choice voting in America? Alaska. Who is the most moderate Republican in the Senate? Lisa Murkowski, right, who got elected that way. So we need to bring the bottom up economically. As far as social networks are concerned, well, it's, you know, everyone at the Times knows. So I have actually never looked at Twitter, never looked at Facebook, never looked at Instagram, never looked at TikTok, and never smoked a cigarette. And my plan is to die saying all five, okay? So I consume zero social media. And because I consume zero social media, in my world, everybody likes me, okay? And I know that's not true, but I know I don't come and sit down and say, did you see that tweet about me by that person? That's so unfair. So I leak zero energy. I'm completely focused forward. I think it's all crap. And I tell everyone, get out of Facebook and into somebody's face, okay? So.
We have one of the leading thinkers on global issues, so I want to make sure we get some questions to you about that. There's so much going on in the world. I mean, if at any other time what's going on in Iran right now would be front page, top headline news every day. But it's, you know, if it's in the paper, it's hidden away somewhere. Very few people are talking about it. Is this something significant that's, I mean, we've had protests in Iran, many protests over the years on all sorts of issues. Is something different happening right now, in your opinion, or is this just a run-of-the-mill unrest?
Iranian crackdown, yeah. So
not even necessarily crackdown, the protests themselves.
Right, yeah.
I mean, is it possible to have regime change in Iran?
It's a very good question because it'll only happen from the top down. It will not happen from the bottom up. So the real question for Iran is when and if does the regime crack at the top, which is what happened in the Soviet Union, basically. Could a Gorbachev there emerge? I would start with the meta point. What this moment in Iran tells you is that this government cannot solve its problems. Okay, that to me is the most important point. It has created such an environmental mess and such an economic mess that it cannot actually solve the problems for the people of Iran. So it's going to have to change. How it does that, I don't know, but eventually, because the system ultimately will just collapse of its own weight. And so the dangerous thing, you know, I like to say about countries in the Middle East that I've followed that some of them, when you remove the leadership, when you decapitate them, they implode, okay? Others explode. So Iran is a country that if you decapitate the regime, it'll actually explode because the key minorities, Baluchis, Azeris, Arabs, and I'm leaving somebody out, all live along the borders. So the center the Persian center, basically, the whole place could spin out of control. And that's one of the things I've learned in the Middle East, that the opposite of democracy there is not, the opposite of dictatorship there is not democracy, it's disorder. All right, so this is very, very dangerous, because disorder in a country of 90 million people with a significant minority population living on the edges could, that's why the Arabs and Israel, basically surrounding Arab states, said, please, Mr. Trump, don't do anything, you know. And so it's just, I feel so bad. This is an incredibly talented population. They so deserve a better government than they have. And you just have to pray that there'll be some break at the top under the pressure of the fact they cannot solve. It's a completely failed zombie regime. It only has the strength to kill enough people, you know, to quell a rebellion, but it can't solve the problems.
You've written about the role of Israeli intelligence in sort of undermining some sense of order within the Iranian regime. How significant do you think that is in undermining what is going on right now within the government of Iran?
Hard to know. I don't know. It only, my sense, is important at the margins. You need the internal thing to be going, and then you can put fuel on that fire, but you can't create it de novo, is my feeling.
On Israel, you know, we have a peace deal going on now with Gaza. I think you've been supportive of this peace deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, anything that would stop the killing was, to me, and stop the killing, return the hostages, exchange the prisoners, that, to me, I supported that 100%.
What's the end game, though? What's next?
I have no idea.
There have been plenty of peace deals.
Yeah.
There have been accords. There have been, you know, all
It's,
sorts of things. Abraham Accords.
And I pointed this out when I said this.
Yeah.
Look, I'm really glad we can stop the killing. And but what the only way we're going to get out of this is, look, you know, I've written so much about Gaza, but this was the war. I called this war didn't have a name. I called it the war of the worst, because it was driven by the worst people on all sides. The worst of Israel, the worst of the Palestinians, the worst of Hezbollah, the worst of it. It was really the war of the worst. And it's brought nothing.
Qatar.
And it cut to all of it, but just the absolute worst people, and it's brought nothing but tears. To end it, we have to get back to the only fair, just, and workable solution, which is separation between Israelis and Palestinians into two states for two people. That's been my view from the very beginning, okay? So, and people tell me I'm so naive to still believe that, to which I tell them, no, naive is thinking this is going to end in any other way but a war, a forever war with bigger and bigger weapons if we don't go there. So the question, now we've got this board of peace, I don't really know what it is. You know, it just, I'm in the mood of...
Canada's not part of it.
Canada's not, well, you didn't pay the $1 billion, you know, so... like, to who, where, why $1 billion? I mean, just like... But here's the reason I'm not going to trash it, you know. Look, if you've been following me from the very beginning here, the day this Israeli government was elected, I did a column saying the Israel you knew is over. Because I knew these people. And they are radical, radical people who want to absorb the West Bank, annex it. I knew these people. And a lot of people at the time said, you're exaggerating, you're this or that. No, I got that one right. Got a lot of things wrong. I got that one right because I knew these people. So everything I've been writing, the subtext has been, how can I blow up this Israeli government? I'm proud of the fact I got President Biden to twice speak out on the record in my column against the judicial coup going on there. Eventually, Donald Trump is going to wake up and realize that Bibi Netanyahu is not a partner for anything, okay? And that if Trump wants to really make peace with his board of peace, this Israeli government will never be a partner for that. Where the Palestinians can put together a leadership team that can be, that will be their challenge on their side. But I can tell you for sure this Israeli government isn't. And so I'm actually supporting this board of peace idea even because the sooner we get to that reality, I think the better off we will be. I think that's a chance for really opening a different path here. But it's really, I found it hard to write about for a while now. It's so sad, it's so broken. Everybody's mad at everybody. And, if there's a way to get this on track, I will certainly be supporting it. But it's got to be real.
Right. Speaking of deals, Ukraine. So you have written really articulately about sort of the distinction between I think you call it a dirty deal as opposed to a filthy deal. So first of all, explain what you mean by those two, and what message are we sending to Vladimir Putin about these stolen turkeys if we allow this to proceed?
Well, let me start from 30,000 feet, if I could be, and I'll bring together Gaza and Ukraine, which is what I wrote a couple of years ago, which is that what was going on in the world, basically 3 years ago, what was going on in the world was that Ukraine was trying to join the West. It wanted to be part of the European Union. And if Ukraine were able to join the West, it would be the biggest expansion of a Europe whole and free since the fall of the Berlin Wall. And Ukraine is a country of some 40 million people, very educated population, tech savvy, big army. If Ukraine were able to join the EU, we would have a Europe whole and free. At the same time, Biden was trying to bridge a deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia in return for opening of peace talks with the PA. And if Israel and Saudi Arabia were to normalize, it would be the biggest expansion of peace in the Middle East since Camp David. And Putin understood the first, and Iran understood the second. And that's why Putin attacked Ukraine, and it's why Iran/Hamas attacked Israel. Both of them wanted to prevent this expansion of an inclusive Europe and an inclusive Middle East. And so now where are we in Ukraine, is that at the time of the war, I said, look, this is going to have to end with a dirty deal because Russia's got 4 times the population of Ukraine. Ukraine can't keep this up forever, even with American aid. But I distinguish between a dirty deal and a filthy deal. And to me, a dirty deal is where Russia gets to keep basically what it's got, but no more. And Ukraine gets to join the European Union and is protected. It can't join NATO because that's just going to be too complicated now, but is protected by a European peacekeeping force backed by the United States, so Putin can't come back. You get me Ukraine into the European Union, protected by a European security force backed by the United States, and Vladimir Putin, for the rest of his life, will have to look across at a Ukraine, a Slavic Ukraine, becoming a prosperous country as part of the EU, while Slavic Russians are trapped in his kleptocracy. And I can't think of a better punishment for that really bad man. Okay, so I call that a dirty deal. A filthy deal would say Ukraine has to limit its number of troops, can't have European security, maybe join the EU, maybe not, because that's a deal that says Putin can come back at any time. And shame on anyone who would sign that deal. I know no Ukrainian government would. About Trump, I'm not so sure.
I'd love your thoughts on Greenland, or Iceland.
Iceland, Greenland.
Call it whatever you want.
It's all ice.
It's a bunch of ice. First of all, what the hell is going on? Why? Second of all, what does it mean for this country? There was talk for a while, and who knows if there'll be again, of this notion of a 51st state. Poland was followed by, my parents' country and Hungary and a lot of other countries. So there's precedent for this. Why does he want Greenland, and what are the implications if the U.S. ultimately does take Greenland?
Yeah. Again, I will confess something. I've said this before. I've never spoken to a single person in the Trump administration, and have never been spoken to by a single person in the Trump administration. So anyone who tells... Now, by the way, I'd be happy to talk to them, but it's actually a waste of time. Because, first of all, no official wants to be seen with me. That's dangerous. Anything they would tell me even if they slipped me a note under the door, I wouldn't believe, because Trump could countermand it with a tweet the next day. So you're teaching journalism. All journalism is really stopped in that sense. There's no scoops out of this administration, because who would trust it? Who would tell you? And whoever told you doesn't know, because Trump could countermand it in a second with a tweet. So I save a lot of time. I mean, it's just, I can tell you, what it's about. Look, this is madness. It's a man who who do you know who would put his name on someone else's Peace Prize and someone else's Kennedy Center? You know what I mean? So is a man of giant appetites who thinks big is better, and he'll go down in history if he enlarges the United States, And I think a lot of it is that. I want to be thought of as a guy who added a 51st state. And like so many things, I would bet dollars to donuts this idea was put into his head by someone at the Mar-a-Lago bar. Okay? I'm really serious about that. I bet when we read the real history of this, because the real story of the Trump 2 administration is Trump 1 was surrounded by buffers, and Trump 2 is surrounded by amplifiers. So in Trump 1, Trump would go to the Mar-a-Lago bar, guy would come over and say, Donald, got an idea for you. Let's turn Gaza into the French Riviera. Great idea. Trump would come back to the Oval Office, sit down with General Kelly, tell General Kelly this. General Kelly would say, Mr. President, what a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? Let's let Mattis study it with a team at the NSC, and they would divert the whole thing. Now it goes right from the Mar-a-Lago bar to the Oval Office, to your living room, unfiltered and unbuffered. And so who knows what's rattling around in his head.
I mean, you saw that with the FCPA, where he was like, I want to get rid of the FCPA, and Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State, was like, it's not how it works, let's just move on. And it ended. And in fact, the first Trump administration had hit record numbers of FCPA prosecutions. Now the FCPA is dead, basically, because there's no Rex Tillerson.
There's no Rex Tillerson, there's no buffers. He's surrounded completely by bobbleheads. And, so it's a very dangerous situation. But I'm hopeful with the midterms we will get power. But this is what I tell everybody, whether you're from Minnesota or everyone, get power, win the election. Nothing else matters. And whatever you have to do, walk, slide, slither, bike, ride, fly, train, I don't care. Vote and register someone to vote. Nothing else matters.
We just have a couple minutes left. There's been a lot of criticism amongst this group, amongst you, about politicians not standing up, not doing enough, about the role of social media. But let's just talk about run-of-the-mill journalists. We're both run-of-the-mill journalists. My old shop, 60 Minutes, had a little scandal recently that I've written about, and I had a letter to David Ellison about it.
Can I ask what you wrote?
Sorry?
What did you write?
Lowell Bergman and I basically wrote to David Ellison saying that there needs to be the firewall between corporate and editorial needs to be firm. Yeah. That can't be crumbling. And, inside baseball, but, they put your former colleague, Barry Weiss, in this new role where she circumvented that. And so she's been allowed to essentially move the goalpost of reporting. And that was presaged by these lawsuits against CBS and ABC and other organizations that ultimately these organizations capitulated to without any fighting, even though there was no merit to it. I think about David McCraw, your lawyer at New York Times, who so brilliantly stood up when Donald Trump wanted to sue the New York Times for saying that he was defamed by the Times in 2016 by, I can't remember who wrote the story, but story that he was sexually, assaulting people. And David McCraw's letter back was, let me explain defamation. It needs to harm your character. You have boasted that you're willing to grab people by the, whatever, and walk in on children changing in the dressing room. So we didn't really change any perceptions. That doesn't happen very much these days. So where are the journalists? What's the role? how are they doing, and what can journalists do better? Because you're talking about these elections, a lot of people count on journalists to understand what's going on in the world. Are journalists doing a good enough job?
So I'm really always careful not to speak about journalists and journalism. I'll speak about the New York Times, what I know, and I'm privileged to work for an amazing newspaper, an amazing family, the Salzburgers, who have stood up to his lawsuits and are doubling down on their investments. And by the way, we're fighting on two fronts because Silicon Valley, I won't name the companies, have basically stolen all our information to train their AIs without paying us. And so we're fighting two bit different. There's a big lawsuit going on right now. So, but you know, I always tell people, Peter, I've been at the New York Times now for 45 years, and I've been the person, probably the principal person, writing about the most neuralgic issue for the New York Times for 44 years, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And in 45 years, I've worked for Punch Sulzberger, his son Arthur, who made me a columnist, and now his grandson, who is my publisher. And in 45 years, the Sulzberger family, 3 generations, has never said one word to me about anything I've written about the Middle East. Not, could you be a little nicer to Bibi? Could you be a little harsher? Not one word. Do you know what a privilege it is to have that platform and work for a family that gives you that? So I'm really lucky, and it breaks my heart to see, you know, 60 Minutes, because I know a lot of these people myself and whatnot, to get caught up in these kinds, because these are crown jewels, you know. And all I hope, you know, that, and I'm not speaking about anyone in particular here, I'm just saying generally the phenomena. One thing I learned in the Middle East, the only good thing about extremists is they don't know when to stop. In the end, they go right over the cliff. And so my hope is that, you know, this will bump up against the wall. There will be a backlash. But right now, and I will say, if you ask me, people ask me, what do I read every day? Well, I read the New York Times, I read the Financial Times, I read the Economist. I read the Washington Post, although its editorial page has become very disappointing under Jeff Bezos. But I live also to read the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal, which has been one of the most stalwart opponents of so many crazy things Trump has done. Now you can say, well, Rupert Murdoch is covering his bets. He uses Fox here and the Wall Street Journal there, but the Journal's been fantastic. And so it gives me hope, you know, that people will stand up. But I'm very, very worried. I've never been more worried about my country, my profession, because there's just now so many big money tech bros, you know, controlling so much media with this crazy notion that editing is the same as censorship. Editing is not censorship. Do we make mistakes sometimes? Absolutely. But this notion that anything goes is going to destroy the 2 pillars of a democracy, which are truth and trust. If we don't know what is true, we don't know which direction to go. And if we can't trust each other, we can't go there together. And big, hard things can only be done together. So, you know, I just tell everyone, this is, for me personally, the fight of my life. And I'm not tired. Thank you.
All right, well, we'll join you on that journey. Everyone, please join me in thanking Tom.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it.